Hi, my name is Tamara, and you are watching Things Even a Monkey Should Know. Thanks for watching today. As you know, if you've watched some of the other videos, I am not a professional at this do-it-yourself stuff. I am just a girl who's figured out that there are a number of things around the house and around the yard and on my cars that I can do myself instead of calling someone else in to do it and having to pay them a bundle of money for it. So today I'm going to show you a few fluids on your cars that you can just check periodically to help keep your car running well and working well and all that stuff. So let's get started. Okay, so there's really only two things that you need to check your car's fluids. One is going to be a relatively clean towel. The other is going to be your vehicle. Now I have a car and a truck, and the fluids are located in vastly different places on both of them, so I'm actually going to show you under the hood on both of them so that you'll have a general idea of just where all this stuff can kind of be poked in and hidden. Of course, the first thing that you'll want to do is pop the hood. So as with most vehicles, I would say 99.9% of them, you're going to have your hood latch right down here on the driver's side, somewhere over in the direction of the door. This is the emergency brake release on this vehicle, and here's the hood release. So you just pull it forward, and you heard the hood just released. So the super nice thing on this truck is that you do not have to put a stick underneath the hood to keep it up. You just, well, they always have that latch, I forgot about that. You reach under the center of the hood, and generally it's a little thing that goes to the left. And it releases the hood, and then you're able to just open it, and it holds itself up. So if you've never looked under your hood of your vehicle before, it's never a bad idea to look under there and just kind of get a general idea of how things should look, so that if you have to take your vehicle in for something, you have a general idea of what the mechanics are talking about when they talk to you. But so onto the fluids. There are generally about 7 fluids that you want to keep an eyeball on. The first, of course, is going to be engine oil. And the way that you check the level of your oil, there's often two places. Hold on. Hope I don't make you sick, but I have to reach in here to show you. This is where oil goes to add oil to your tank, or to your engine, I mean. And this is where your dipstick that you pull out so that you can actually check the level of your oil. And the dipstick always will be made so that it is ergonomically correct, more or less, to be able to pull it out to check it. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And one thing you want to keep in mind, among many others, is that you always want your vehicle to be sitting on a level surface whenever you go to check your fluids, because otherwise you won't get a proper reading on what all or how much is there. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this out, and this is why you need a towel, is because often your oil will be kind of splattered around on the dipstick, so you will usually want to wipe it off once and then stick it all the way back in, pull it out again, and check it. So as you can see, my oil is very dirty, but let's see where the, whoops, I was holding this up so I could show you what I was doing, and it started to run. So my full line is, whoops, right here, and the oil was indeed right there. It looks so dark and dirty because, well, it is. It actually is due for an oil change. Oil changes are something I do not do myself because after looking at the cost, I actually would not save any money, so I do not do those myself. Okay, so the next thing is, since that had enough oil, we don't need to add any. If I was to need to add any, then again, I would add it right here where it says engine oil. The next thing to keep an eye on is brake fluid, and this is something that I just check, but I don't ever fill it myself simply because I don't feel comfortable doing it, because I know there are different types and I'm just afraid I would get the wrong one. So if it's something that you're comfortable doing, that's great, but if not, if you notice it's low, you can just take it to wherever you get your oil changed and you can say, hey, my brake fluid is low, please fill it up. So I'm going to show you, at least in this truck, where the fluid is. And this is actually the container for it right here. And you can see the max fill line is here. This thing is sitting a little bit crooked, so obviously the fluid does not look like it's level across there, but it would be below the max fill. So you do not ever want to fill your fluids over that line, because if they get hot, then they can cause the cap to rupture and burst off and make a huge expensive mess inside your engine. The next one to look at is your engine coolant. And on my truck, it is right here, right in the front. The radiator is across here, and the coolant is right next door. And again, the coolant has fill levels. So this would be the maximum amount of coolant that you would want to be in here when your vehicle's been sitting. And whenever your vehicle is hot, there's one way down in there. But I would check it, like I said, always whenever it's cool. So mine is, again, within the range. Something that I have noticed several times whenever I've gotten my oil changed is that the people there evidently have not, it makes me nervous actually, they don't, I guess, understand the difference between the hot fill level and the cold fill level, and so when the truck is there getting an oil changed, it's hot. And so the coolant is down in the radiator, flowing around, and it hasn't returned back to the tank, so they go ahead and they fill this all the way up. And so they'll fill it all the way to the top, even past the cold fill level. And so I've had to pump this stuff out, and I don't really like having to do that. You can buy siphons, and that's what I have, but I don't understand why they feel the need to do that. But that's another thing to check, because again, if it gets too hot, then it can cause this cap to burst, and it can make a huge mess in your engine. So the next thing is washer fluid, and while it's not such a vital fluid as far as running, it's really nice when you're going down the road and you need to wash those bugs or that dirt off your windshield, and you can just you know, turn it on and do that. So I can actually see on the side, you can see the blue there, so I've got plenty. It's very easy to fill. You just open this up, whoops, and there it is. And you can do that yourself easy enough. Let's see, the next thing is the battery. Now I have a maintenance-free battery. Occasionally you'll run across a battery that you have to put water into, and this was something I learned the hard way, because I didn't even know they made those kind of batteries anymore. And I had one, and it ran out of water, and then the battery quit working, period, and it didn't matter if you put more water in it. So if it is not maintenance free, it'll have cells across the top, and it will say battery fluid goes here. That's very different from battery acid. It's just distilled water typically. And the last thing that I actually, let's make sure we got them. Oh, power steering fluid. That is not the last thing. It is another one that I do not feel comfortable filling myself, but I will check the levels of it. It is stuffed way down in here, and all these things always say on the top. My truck is very old and it still has all the labels. So it's another thing, like I said, that I don't feel comfortable filling, but I do keep an eye on it, because if your power steering fluid is low or dirty or goes away, your car is going to be very difficult to steer. It's the same thing with the brake fluid. If your brake fluid gets dirty or it's low or your brake line has a leak in it, you're not going to be able to stop your car. That's why it's important to check these things. Okay, so on the power steering fluid, again, there is a max fill line here, and mine is sitting, thank you again to the people who I feel like might not quite know what they're doing sometimes. Mine is actually sitting just a little bit above the max fill line, so I actually do need to pump some of that out, or siphon some of it out. So on my vehicles, that is actually the last thing that I can check on this truck. If you have an automatic transmission car or truck, then you will be able to check your transmission fluid levels. Now on mine, I have a standard transmission, and so I cannot get to that stuff. But it is also another thing that you'll want to keep an eye on, because if your transmission fluid is low or missing, then your transmission is going to be grinding against metal to metal, because the transmission fluid is actually oil, and it'll wreck your transmission really quick. So that is the last important one to check. So I'm just going to point out really quick to you on my car where all these things are, because like I said, they are in a very different place. Okay, I just wanted to show you with the click where the hood latch is. Again, it's going to be in basically the same place on every vehicle. Mine is right here, right under the gas tank, gas cap release button. And that's all you do. So again, just like on the truck, there's going to be the hood release. I always have a little bit harder of a time finding it on the car. But pretty much you always push them to the left to release your hood. And on the car, it actually does not have the hood that stays up on its own. So you want to make sure that you support it adequately before you go sticking your head under there. I'm giving you kind of a broad range shot of the car before I get all the way under here. The fluids are again in a very different place. This car is a Nissan 350Z, so again it's very different from the truck. And I'm going to go ahead and bring you up a little bit closer, but you can already see the yellow handle looking thing standing up there. That is for the oil. So that is actually the dipstick, like I said, and it always is going to say too, I mean this one was nice and bright, but it always is going to tell you, it's going to say engine oil on there. So this one is really squeezed in here and it's a little awkward. And the oil on the car should be cleaner than on the truck because I just had it changed a lot more recently. Still going to do the double dip just to be sure. But it is right perfectly on the line. Whoops, you can't even see that because I was holding it down too low. It's right perfectly on the line there. And see how much clearer this oil looks than what came out of the truck. Like I said, the oil's been changed much more recently in this one. Alright, so I go ahead and put the dipstick back in. You want to just make sure, depending on your vehicle, this one has to stick out in a funky way. So you just want to make sure it's seated all the way back in there. If I did need to add oil for some reason, you would add it right here. And a note that I want to make about oil is that there are a few different types of oil. There's primarily used in cars and trucks is either 10W30 oil or 5W30 oil. And that can be regular oil or synthetic blend oil or full synthetic oil. So if you go adding oil to your vehicle, you do want to make sure that you match the kind that's already in there. So I happen to know that in my car I use a 5W30 synthetic blend. So I would not, if I needed oil in it, I would not want to add a full synthetic to that. In the truck I use a 10W30 just regular oil. So again, I would not want to add synthetic to that either. Okay, so the next thing, I'm going to go ahead and, since we're not in the area, but kind of, I'm going to show you where the brake fluid is on this car. It is actually in this nifty little compartment that says brake fluid. And, whoops. And so the max fill line is right there, and the fluid is below that. So I know that that fluid is good. Let's replace the lid here. Probably that is not supposed to fall off that way. And we'll go ahead and look at the battery since we're up here in the tops. And again, this actually was where I learned about the maintenance-free or maintenance battery. And I had a battery that had to have fluid in it in here, and whenever it conked out, then I replaced it with a maintenance-free battery. So I do not have to worry about that. So again, this is the, let me make sure I'm in the right place here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to point and show you and watch where I have this aimed at the same time. This is the power steering fluid. The max fill line, they actually, on this one, this is very nice. I didn't have this on the truck. It shows you where the level of the fluid should be if the car is hot, like the max hot fill and the max, or the minimum hot fill, and the same with the cool. So it's halfway between the cool max and the cool minimum, so that's pretty perfect. This is, of course, the wiper fluid. Now, in the car, I cannot see where the tank is, so if I was to put fluid in there, then I would just put it until it came up to where I could see it, because there is no max or minimum on that. And then the last thing is, of course, the refrigerant or the coolant. And that one, it's hard, I can't actually show you because it's way down in here, but the max fill line is right down here, and the coolant is actually exactly to that line. There are two types of coolant. There's a high mile coolant, and or anyways, there's a red coolant and a green coolant. Most cars have the green, but make sure that you match the color correctly. That's what I'm trying to get to. And it is really important not to let your car get low on or run out of coolant, because if it does, then your vehicle will overheat and you will be stuck on the side of the road, and seriously, nobody wants that. So the only other thing that, again, I can't check in here would be transmission fluid. And this car is a standard shift, so all of that is put away where I can't get to it. So there's one other thing that I think is really important to share with you about these fluids. So say that your coolant is overfilled, or you've got too much oil, or too much this fluid, or too much that fluid. What do you do with it whenever you pump it out? That is a good question. Well, here's the answers, as best as I know them. With antifreeze, the green stuff that goes in your radiator, if you have to pump that out, well, of course, you don't want to pour it out on the ground because it's really toxic to animals, and it's not real good for vegetation or anything either. So, surprisingly, if you are hooked up to a city sewer, not a septic system, but like a city system or whatever, you can actually pour it down the drain. And most of the time, if you call your city to ask, that's what they're going to tell you. Now, if you're hooked up to a septic system, don't do that. You need to find somewhere else to dispose of it, because if you dump it down your septic system, it's probably going to kill your bacteria in your tank. If that is the case, then you should call your local municipality, getting ahead of myself there, and ask them, tell them you're on septic, and ask them how to dispose of excess antifreeze. Now, if you have motor oil that you need to dispose of, you should put it in a clean container. Don't put it in a nasty container that has paint, old paint or dirt or anything like that in it. Put it in a clean one, and often you can take it to a garage that changes oil and they'll dispose of it for you. Sometimes auto parts stores will have an oil collection place and they'll dispose of it. So, and then again, as a last resort, you can always call the city and say, hey, I've got motor oil, what can I do with it? If you have, let's see, what are those others? Transmission fluid or brake fluid, or I'm going to forget. What did we go over? I might have to look it back under the hood so I can remember. The rest of, let's see, the other fluids, transmission fluid, brake fluid, power steering fluid, any of those three are actually very bad, and they're toxic and should not be mixed with the motor oil or with each other. It's okay here and there, but just largely don't do it. Put them all in separate containers that are clean, once again, and wherever it is that you can take your motor oil to be recycled or disposed of, they'll generally take any of those fluids also. If you have washer fluid, like too much washer fluid for your spraying on your windshield. I am running out of words here. That, believe it or not, it does have some toxins in it too. It has like methanol or something nasty in it. Anyways, it keeps it from freezing. And it is actually toxic, and it should not be dumped down your drain, believe it or not, or out on the ground. So in that case, you would want to call your city and see where they have a hazardous waste disposal station. And all of this disposal stuff should be free, because they want to encourage you to dispose of your waste properly rather than just dumping it out into the environment. So, did you learn something today? I hope that if you felt wary of poking around underneath the hood of your car before now, I hope you feel a little more comfortable with it now, because it's not a bad place to be, and it's not a bad place to be familiar with. Nevertheless, whatever your comfort level is, it's a really good idea to keep an eye on those fluids and just check them from time to time, and even check them after you've gone and gotten an oil change, because again, sometimes they will overfill things, and that can lead to problems for you down the road. So, I think that's all that I have to go over today. Thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please subscribe, and I hope to see you next time.